be going over the Koppen Geiger classification again. There has still been quite a bit of confusion, at least from the muddiest points, about how to do the Koppen Geiger classification, when it's okay to use intuition versus of examples about how I go about doing the problems. I hope you find this video helpful. Again, I still really recommend you watch Brian's video that's also on Canvas. That will also help clear some things up. He goes through it in maybe a lot more detail than I do. Um, but again, I do want to reiterate what Dr. Van Lukey has said in class, that we will not be doing a full one of these on the exam. So you really just need to understand that there are different Koppen Geiger classifications and that the different Koppen Geiger classifications govern sometimes what can be grown there along with the crop and soil health. Um, anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started on this examples. What I've done is I've just chosen really just two of my favorite cities and two different Koppen Geiger classifications um, and gone from there. Okay, so I want to first draw your attention to a couple of different things on the screen. First is these two maps. You can find these in the slides. It's in the Koppen Geiger slides on Canvas under week 2. Um, or you can just, again, reference this video, take a picture of these, do something. This top one is just a zoomed in version of the United States of what the different Koppen Geiger classifications. On the slides, there is one that is like the whole globe. For the purposes of this class, we will primarily be focusing just on the United States or just North America in general. So this one breaks it down by different classifications. And the reason I'm showing this to you is this I can hope can help address some of the questions about intuition. When I was talking during class, what I meant by that was in the United States, you probably have a relatively good idea the different just like climates or what different places like are compared to another. For example, Florida is very different than Iowa. So that is really what I meant by intuition is just having a general understanding of what is at that place we're asking you to know what the Koppen Geiger classification is. But this map can maybe help you narrow down so that you don't have to do the full like examination of all of the different first letters. So it might help you narrow down whether it's A, B, C, D, or E. Is really what I was getting at. This way you don't have to start with A and work your way through all of them because that can be really time consuming. Um, so use this map to help you out or just your general intuition of what a place is. That is really the only time you can use your intuition about that. So that is what we're doing today. And we're going to kind of go through this and I'm going to use the help of Google. So bear with me on that. Generally, if we were to ask you to do this like we did on the in class, we will actually give you data. But for this, I'm just going to be kind of using Google a little bit to tell me a little bit about the temperature and precipitation averages for these locations. But I really wanted to focus in on how we find the first letter because that can sometimes be the most challenging part. Okay, so I've chosen Nashville, Tennessee and Seattle, Washington. So two very different places if you're familiar with the climatology of the United States, different edges of the country. So let's start with Nashville, Tennessee. So if you're not familiar, maybe where Tennessee. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Things were not working the way they were supposed to. Okay, this is better. Great. So this circle down here on the map is basically where Nashville-ish is, but it's where Tennessee is. Um, we're not going to ask you a city or something that is on the line. We're going to ask between like Koppen Geiger classifications. We're going to ask you, and it's generally going to be that whole state. Seattle is a little bit more difficult, but we will get to that in just a moment. Anywho, so from this, you can probably figure out what the Koppen Geiger classification is basically right away just by looking at the map. So it's this green area, which we can attribute to be CFA. Now, you could indeed just trust your gut and go with it. That is fine. I will warn you with some caution that sometimes the maps aren't always exactly right, but for this class, we will be relying heavily on this map. But if you were to find a map on Google or something like that, those might not be 100% accurate. But um, that is how you could use the map to really figure this out. So CFA is what the Koppen Geiger classification is. Um, oops, I don't know what just happened. Go away. Okay, there we go. CFA, and that just tells us from the map. Now I'm going to kind of break down a little of how you could do that manually, of how to get to CFA. So, and using a little bit of your intuition as well. So, for starters, let's go down here and just focus on Nashville, Tennessee. Forget about the map for a second. Just think in your head a little bit about what we know about Nashville, Tennessee, or just about Tennessee in general. It's not next to any body of water. It is relatively inland. There's mountains. It's in the southeast, which is a relatively good known area for being a little hot and humid, um, especially during the summers. And it does get a little cold during the winter, but nothing compared to Iowa. So that is what I mean by using your intuition. Logically think through what you know about the area to begin with. And it's okay if you didn't know any of that, but maybe you can look at these lists of at least the first letter and identify at least one you can get rid of and not have to worry about. For example, Nashville, Tennessee is not a polar tundra. It's not covered in ice. So let's get rid of E. Okay, great. So another one that we could probably get rid of, just based off of what I know about Nashville and like the deserts in America. The deserts in America are like in the west. Tennessee is in the east. There's no deserts there. It's not like covered in sand. So let's go ahead and get rid of B as well. Great. So that leaves us with A, C, and D. Now, A is tropical, it has rainforest, monsoons, and savanna. This one, it could be tricky, right, if you're not super familiar with where Tennessee is, but generally this happens in an area that is surrounded by a body of water that experiences high amounts of rainfall and has tropical forests in it. That's not really Tennessee. They have mountains, it's inland, it experiences different climates. If you've ever been there, it does get snow, that kind of business. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of A as well. If you were uncertain, you could test A very easily by checking to see if it had a temperature in the cold months greater than 18 degrees Celsius. And it's very simple to do that if you're not given data. So let's just go and check. So let's do average, average winter temperatures in Nashville, Tennessee. in Celsius. Go. Great. Nashville's average winter temperatures ranges from highs around 8 degrees Celsius to 11 degrees Celsius. So that is less than the T cold here given in our table. So that tells us that A is automatically out because it's not greater than 18 degrees Celsius for our wintertime temperatures. Great. Now, C and D, like this is where it would get confusing maybe, because they are relatively similar, right? Is it a temperate climate or is it a cold climate? Um, a general intuition is that we know that Ames starts with a D and it's cold. Tennessee is a bit further south than we are, so my intuition and gut would be telling me that it's probably C, just because Tennessee and Ames have very different like geography, different winter temperatures, things of that nature. But let's test our hypotheses and go with that. So I'm going to test um for C because we already know half the answer. So is T cold greater than 0 but less than 18? Yes, it is. It's 8 to 11. So it is in that threshold, so great. And then is T hot greater than 10? So let's use our good friend Google again. So average summertime temperatures in Nashville, Tennessee in Celsius. So it's around 30 to 32 degrees Celsius or in the upper 80s. Great. So it's greater than 10. Great. So that tells us that it is C. So again, we can get rid of the D climate area. Great. So now we are left with figuring out if it's S, W, or T. Great. So is it a dry summer, dry winter, or without a dry season? So perhaps you don't know and aren't able to figure this out. So let's kind of go through this uh, one by one. So let's figure out if it's a dry summer. So your precipitation in your summer month must be less than 40, and your precipitation of your driest month must be less than your precipitation of your winter month divided by 3. So let's um, go and look what is um, precipitation by month for Nashville. Oops, it would help if I could spell. Tennessee. And we need it to be less than 10, or sorry, less than 40. So, do. Let me see here. Ha, there we go. Let's just look at this image here. So this is in inches. We don't really want it in inches. So maybe this graph here is better. Okay. So we're looking for our summer driest month, which is going to be June. So June is roughly maybe around 82 millimeters, maybe 90. So let's go back to our criteria and look just to be sure. So it says for summer dry, our precipitation must be less than 40. We know that's not the case now. So dry winter, our precipitation of our winter driest month must be less than the precipitation of our wettest month in the summer divided by 10. So let's go back to our map. Oops. Oops. Okay, so let's find first the precipitation of our summer months. So the highest precipitation is in May, and we're going to count that as our summer. So that's maybe 150, and we need to divide that by 10. So 150 divided by 10 is going to give us 15. So then is that going to be less than the precipitation in the winter dry months? We already basically can confirm that nothing is less than 40 here, so we know that that's not true. Oops. So that tells us that we must then have F. Great. I'm gonna try to re-highlight that and maybe make it a thinner line. There we go. Okay, so that leaves us then finding out the third letter of is it A, B, or D, or A, B, or C. Now, intuition should tell you, just based off of what we already know about the temperature, that it's not a cold summer. We were saying earlier that summertime temperatures are in the 80s. That's not cold. Hopefully you know that. So is it a warm summer or is it a hot summer? So T hot is greater than 22. We said earlier that our temperature, I should have wrote this down. We'll do that for the next one. But our temperatures were in 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 30 degrees Celsius. So that is hotter than 22. So that makes it a hot summer, which again brings us back up to this CFA. So that is how you manually do it by hand for Nashville, Tennessee. Hopefully you were able to follow how I went through and did that. I really, really recommend doing that process of trying to eliminate at least one or two so you don't have to do all of them. It takes a little bit more time, but you can just in case you don't know anything about the place. Okay, we're now going to move on to Seattle, Washington. This one's a little less like cookie cutter, figuring it out by the map. So let's zoom in about where Seattle, Washington is. So it is somewhere up here on the corner of Washington. Now there are basically three different Koppen Geiger classifications that are falling within there. So that's why I mean that this one's maybe not as cookie cutter of an example as Nashville was. Um, so again, we are not going to ask you to do something like this on an exam, especially when it is as hard as this one, because there are multiple that are showing up on the map within one another's region. So this is just an example of like a harder one. And I didn't know that when I was going to pick this location, so I surprised myself as well. Okay, so hopefully maybe from this map though, you can maybe pick out a couple of the different colors. It's really just two, but you maybe want to include the purple just a little bit. But Seattle's a little bit closer to the Pacific Ocean. So I'm really just going to stick with the green, that's lime green, so CFB, or this like mustard yellow color that is CSB. So we know it's probably one of those two. But again, we're going to go through this and use a little bit of our intuition to help us figure this out at first. So just like last time, we know that for starters, it's not a polar region. Really, you're going to be hard pressed to find anywhere on the continental United States that's going to be an E. So go ahead and get rid of that. We know that Seattle is not covered in ice. Alongside of that, we know that it's not a desert. At least I know that. If you're a Grey's Anatomy fan, just maybe like myself, this should give you a little bit of insight about what Seattle is like. So we know that it's not covered in desert. It's not covered in sand. So that leaves us again with A, C, or D. Um, Now, Seattle is right next to a ocean. So leaving A is not a bad idea. It does receive a lot of rain. So it could, experience the monsoon conditions. But we also know a little bit maybe about Seattle. Um, if you're also a Twilight fan, this also might help you out with this too. Sorry, you might all be a little too young for this, but anywho, we know that it rains a lot, so therefore it's not going to have very hot temperatures because there's not a lot of incoming solar radiation to warm it up. So we're going to be hard pressed to figure out um, if the temperatures in the cold months are greater than 18. But we can look. Let's just go ahead and do that just so that everyone's on the same page. So let's go back. Uh, Winter temperatures in Seattle, Washington, in Celsius. Always spell Celsius wrong. Okay, so uh, Google AI was not as helpful. Let's try images. Okay, this one will do. We love a good weatherandclimate.com. So this is for Seattle. Finding the winter months, so like January and February, is it greater than 18 degrees Celsius? No, right? We're only seeing around 5. So it does receive snowfall. We have the mountains right there. We do expect it to be a little colder. So again, we can get rid of A. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so again, this leaves us with C and D. So let's think about C and D. We just stated though, so the difference between C and D is really this T cold. Is T cold between 0 and 18, or is it less than 0? We just said that for January and February, it was around 5 degrees Celsius, and we don't fall below 0 here, degrees Celsius. We don't see that on the map. So that tells us that we then can get rid of D. So now all we are left with is C. So now we need to figure out if it is CSW or CSW or F. Sorry, SW or F. Next, so is it a dry summer, dry winter, or without a dry season? Now, um, again, if you are particularly into Grey's Anatomy, or if you're into Twilight, maybe that will help you. Pop culture can help. Just saying that it's without a dry season, but just because it rains all the time, Seattle is actually the most rainiest city in America, if you didn't know that. Uh, but let's just go ahead and double check just to be sure um, that we all understand what we're doing. So, dry summer is PS dry, so the summer dry month, less than 40. Let's see if the temperature map is on here. It is not, unfortunate. Precipitation by month for Seattle, Washington. and we're going to specifically say in millimeters this time. See what we can get. Images, hopefully we can get something very close to last time. We can. Perfect. Great. Okay, so this first month, so here we're looking, just to reference back, we are looking to see if PS dry is less than 40. Now here we do see that July is our driest month in the summer. So, and it's less than 40. We don't need to know the exact number per se at the moment. So let's flip back. So this is dry summer is a contender, but is PS dry less than PS wet of the winter month divided by 3? So let's find the wettest winter month. Oops. So the wettest winter month is November, and we're just going to go with 160 just for some simple math. 160 divided by 3 is roughly 53. Great. So it is saying that we do have a dry summer, which is very interesting. I wonder when this was put together. Oops. There we go. Okay. So we're just gonna keep rolling with it though, since that's what we have found. So that we have a dry summer. Because again, we will not um be able to get to F if because it's not CS or CW. And we could double check that it's not a dry winter. PW dry is less than PS wet divided by 10. So let's look for the driest winter month, which appears maybe to be February, which is roughly around 80. And the wettest month in the summer uh, is maybe around 120. 120 divided by, where did it go? 120 divided by 10 is 12. So we know that's not true. So it's not a dry winter. So that leaves us with dry summer. So right now we're sitting at CS. And then is it a hot summer, warm summer, or cold summer? So if it's a hot summer, we are looking for temperatures greater than 22. So let's flip back to our handy dandy thing over here. Um, there we go. Okay, so we're looking for summer greater than 22. We don't see anything greater than 20. So we can get rid of that. So it's not A. And then is it a warm summer? So um, T mon 10. So is that greater than 4? Basically, if we come down here to our little handy dandy thing, T mon 10 is number of months where the temperature is above 10. So is the number of months, so in this case 4 months, are there 4 months throughout the year where the temperature is greater than 10? Let's see here. Okay, so we know we have July is greater than 10. We know we have August is greater than 10. We have September is greater than 10. And we have October is greater than 10. And we also, have over here, which is April, May, and June. But to summarize, we have more than 4 months greater than 10. So that tells us that it must be B. It's a warm summer. And it's not a cold summer. We can really look at these, right? We wouldn't consider temperatures in like the 70s to be cold. So that leaves us with CSD. B, which if we think about it, and come back up, oops, to the map, it was one of them that we could choose from. So that is CSB. It just is not CFB, which is it's right on the line. So, this could have changed from when the map came out, um, or whatever. So that's what I mean also by using the map can sometimes be a little challenging, just because it is hard to tell. So I always recommend doing it by hand. But again, that map helps you maybe narrow down the first letter, especially. Um, so this is really how we walk through the Koppen Geiger classification. This is how we can determine what is what, and really just mark down what we need to look at and what we don't need to look at. Hopefully this video helped. I really, really hope this helped, walking through this slowly on how to get through these two cities. Test yourself. Use Google as your resource to check to see if you did the Koppen Geiger classification correctly, okay? Um, Try different cities. Make sure you understand this. But like I said, this is not going to show up on the exam of how to actually do one of these. What you need to understand is that these different Koppen Geiger classifications dictates what we can grow and what can live in these different areas. So for example, um, Nashville, Tennessee, it's a lot warmer. We have a no dry season. So that allows us to maybe grow crops during the winter, which we grow crops in the southeast. And it's warm summer. So that allows us to accumulate growing degree days faster, maybe than in Iowa. Seattle, on the other hand, we have a dry season, so it's a dry summer. That's what the S is standing for. So perhaps we don't grow crops in the northwest, at least not really like corn or soybean or anything like that. I'm not exactly sure what's grown there, but hopefully this has helped you see those connections as well. So that's what you need to know on the exam. That's what you need to know going forward throughout the rest of this class. Please reach out if you have any other questions about this. I'm happy to answer anything else. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in class.